Welcome in, everybody, ready to dive into a case that's really left its mark on true crime history. The Zodiac Killer. We got a lot to unpack here.
It's a case that, even after all these years, just it chills you to the bone thinking about it.
It really does. You know, we're talking late 60s, early 70s. A time, yeah, there's a lot going on socially, politically, but also a lot of fear, especially in Northern California. This is where it all went down.
And this wasn't just any killer, the Zodiac. He wanted to be known, and he made sure everyone felt that fear. The attacks themselves, the letters. It was like he was creating a brand of terror.
Yeah, his first victims, those poor kids, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. Just teenagers on a date. It was December of '68, Vallejo, California. Parked on this secluded road.
Yeah. I can't imagine the feeling in that community after that. A seemingly random attack, brutal. It just shook everyone to the core.
And sadly, it was just the beginning. A few months later, July '69, same story, different victims. Darlene Ferrin and Mike McGough. And it was the same MO.
But this time, there was a survivor. Mike McGough, he lived to tell the tale. And his account is, I think, one of the few direct glimpses we have into the horror of that night.
So what did McGough say? What did he see?
He described the attacker wearing this hooded mask like an executioner. It's a detail that stuck, became part of the Zodiac's whole image.
It's like he wanted that image, almost like he's playing a role.
Oh, absolutely. He wanted the notoriety, the fame even. He wanted everyone to know it was him, so he started sending these letters.
And these were more than just confessions. They were taunts, riddles, these ciphers, codes, he claimed, held the key to his identity.
The ciphers became an obsession for investigators, for the public. Everyone wanted to crack the code, figure out who this guy was. And one of them, the famous 340-character one, it took over 50 years to solve.
50 years. Wow. Did they finally unmask him? Did they get his name?
It was a huge moment when it was finally cracked just a couple of years ago. But it wasn't what people expected. It didn't really reveal his identity, more like this weird, rambling message.
Okay, so what did it say?
It was full of misspellings, bad grammar, but it was basically mocking the police, saying they wouldn't catch him, that he wasn't afraid of the gas chamber, and this chilling line that he was collecting slaves for the afterlife.
Slaves for the afterlife. Creepy. And the ciphers, they weren't the only thing that was just, completely unsettling. He'd write these things in the letters, like, I like killing people because it is so much fun.
That's what really gets to you, right? It's the psychology of it all, this calculated cruelty, the need to control, the desire to just instill pure terror. That's what makes the Zodiac, even today, so fascinating and so scary.
And the fact that he was never caught, never identified. Imagine that someone capable of this just disappeared.
Makes you think, right? It could be anyone, someone you know, someone you pass on the street just living a normal life with this dark past. It's a disturbing thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here to do, right? To try and unpack this, to look at the evidence, the suspects, and see if we can shed some light on this mystery that still has a hold on us all these years later. And when you talk about suspects, there's one name that always comes up. Arthur Lee Allen.
Right, Arthur Lee Allen, the prime suspect for a long time.
Yes.
And there was a lot pointing toward him, a lot of circumstantial evidence.
I even read somewhere that he owned a watch, same brand as the Zodiac. The Zodiac watch. What are the odds of that?
It's one of those details, just makes you wonder, right? And it wasn't just that. He liked codes, ciphers. Some people said they saw him near the crime scenes.
Sounds like they were onto something then.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it's not that simple. This case is, it's a maze full of dead ends, contradictions, and this big question. Was Arthur Lee Allen really the Zodiac Killer?
Okay, so we've got this guy, Arthur Lee Allen, right in the crosshairs, but it sounds like a lot of it is, circumstantial. What else did they have on him?
There were stories about him, violent temper, talking about killing people. Someone even said he mentioned using a symbol like the Zodiac symbol as a calling card. Chilling, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But was he actually connected to any of the crime scenes? Physically there?
It was iffy. One of the attacks happened near Lake Berryessa. Allen hung out there, it was known. And he lived in Vallejo, not far from those first murders.
Okay, so he knew the area. But if they had all this, why not arrest him? Why was he never charged?
That's where it falls apart a little bit. Allen was on the radar for years, but there were always problems. He had alibis for some of the attacks, and the witnesses who thought they saw him, their stories didn't really match up.
So the good old eyewitness problem.
Mm-hmm.
Never as reliable as you'd hope. I think maybe the police, they got stuck on Allen and missed other possibilities.
Could be. You get a case this big, so much pressure to solve it. You start seeing what you want to see. Plus, this was back then, right? 60s, 70s. Forensics weren't what they are now.
That's true, that's true. Which reminds me, the DNA, they must tested Alan's DNA against the Zodiac's letters, right? With all the advancements and all.
Yeah, eventually. Took a while, but by the 90s, they could get DNA from from the saliva on the stamps, the envelopes.
Oh.
What happened? Not a match. Didn't match Alan.
So, case closed, right? Wrong guy.
You'd think.
Mm.
But even with that, some people, they still think it was Alan. Say maybe the DNA was messed up somehow, contaminated, over time.
Doesn't that seem like, I don't know, grasping at straws a little bit?
Yeah.
When the science says no.
It's a messy case, no doubt. Room for interpretation. Some folks, they just can't let go of Alan as the Zodiac. All that other evidence, it's hard to ignore.
Fair enough, fair enough. So if it wasn't Alan, who else did they look at? Any other strong suspects?
There were a few names that popped up, but nothing like Alan, not that level of tension. Some thought maybe he was military, the way he knew about codes, weapons.
Interesting. Did that lead anywhere?
Not really. A couple guys fit the description, military background, but it went nowhere. That's the thing with the Zodiac. So careful. Barely left any evidence behind. Like a ghost, almost.
That's the mark of a real pro, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Plan it out, do the deed, vanish. Almost makes you wonder, was he more than just a random killer? Maybe someone with training, Someone who knew how to disappear.
It's been considered, yeah. Some think maybe law enforcement or intelligence even. That would explain how he always stayed one step ahead.
That's scary to think about. Someone who knows how you work, how to outsmart you. But we're getting into speculation territory here. Back to the facts, the letters. You mentioned they had more than just the ciphers and the threats. What else was in there?
Oh, yeah. Some of it was bragging, trying to scare people, but other parts it was like he was trying to explain himself in this twisted way. One letter, he said he was gathering slaves for the afterlife, like some kind of messed up, cult leader vibe.
Wow. It's like trying to see into the mind of a madman. Adds a whole other layer to the whole thing.
For sure. Takes it beyond just your typical serial killer, angry, wanting power. The Zodiac, he was on a whole different level. Something much darker going on there.
It really is disturbing. Something else I always think about, the symbol. The one he drew, the circle with the crosshairs.
Yeah.
He put it everywhere, on the letters, at the crime scenes. Like he was branding his work, like an artist, but in the worst way.
It's exactly that. Branding. Criminals do it, trying to make a name for themselves, create this persona, this identity. And it worked. That symbol, simple as it is, it's iconic. It's the Zodiac.
No doubt. You see that, you know exactly what it means. It's like a warning sign. Reminds you that, evil's out there, can pop up anywhere. It's easy to get lost in the mystery, the investigation, but we can't forget, real people died. Families were shattered. A whole community lived in terror.
It's so important to remember that, the human cost. Behind the headlines, the codes, it was real people who suffered.
Right. Let's talk about them. Who were the victims? What do we know about their lives?
Well, like we said, the first one's David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. Young couple, first date. David was, the athlete, popular kid. Betty Lou, everyone said she was kind, gentle. Their murders, it was like the whole town lost its innocence.
Their families, it's just unimaginable. Did the Zodiac, did he have a type? Was he looking for a certain kind of victim?
Not really, not that we can tell. Different ages, 16 to 29, men and women. That's part of what made him so scary. It could be anyone.
It's like he was playing a game, picking people at random, showing off how powerful he was. It's awful.
You can tell he just didn't care. No empathy, no remorse. It's almost impossible to comprehend.
We got to talk about Mike Mageau, too,
Yeah.
the one who survived. To live with that, knowing the guy who tried to kill you is still out there.
Incredible. Mageau's story, it's both amazing and heartbreaking. He helped the police, but that night it changed him forever.
Yeah. Shows you, even if you survive, you're never the same. The Zodiac, his impact, it went beyond just the victims, families, the whole area, even people who never met him were all affected by it somehow.
It's a haunting case. Still fascinates us, makes us question what we know about people, forces us to look at the dark side, that evil exists, even when you don't expect it.
It's true. Reminds us that the world can be a dangerous place, and that sometimes evil hides behind an ordinary face. But let's shift gears a bit, get away from all this darkness for a minute. The Zodiac, he wasn't just a killer, he became a whole cultural phenomenon,
It's wild, right? You think about it, a real person, but he's become like a myth, a legend almost. The Zodiac Killer.
It's true. I mean, Books, movies, documentaries, you name it, he's everywhere.
Why do you think that is? What is it about this case that just grabs people even after all this time?
I think it's a few things.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's unsolved. People love a good mystery, and this one is, well, it's one for the ages, you know. Yeah, there's just something about not knowing, especially when it's something this big, this scary. It's like we all want to be the one to figure it out, crack the code.
Right. And then you've got the crimes themselves, so brutal, so random. The letters, the hooded figure, it all adds up to something, I don't know, almost larger than life.
It's yeah, it's like straight out of a horror movie, but it actually happened. Taps into that fear we all have, the unknown, the darkness out there.
And don't forget, when all this went down, it was a crazy time. The 60s, 70s, so much change happening. People were already on edge.
And then you get the Zodiac. These cryptic messages, no respect for authority. It's like he was a symbol for all the fear and chaos.
Yeah, like the whole world was falling apart, and here comes this guy adding to it all. And because they never caught him, that fear, it never really went away.
He's like a ghost story we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's maybe why it still fascinates us, right? It's not just about the murders, it's about that feeling, the mystery, the what-ifs.
Exactly. Some things maybe we're not meant to know the answer. The Zodiac case, it's like a reminder of that there are limits to what we can know.
But even if we don't solve it, we can still, I don't know, learn from it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But studying it, analyzing it, maybe we understand these kinds of minds better. And it makes us think about safety, being aware, looking out for each other.
That's a good point. We can't live in fear, but we can, be smart, work together, make things safer.
For sure. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all this. Even with something as dark as the Zodiac, we can still choose hope, choose to understand, to do something.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, something to think about, okay? We've talked about the Zodiac, the crimes, the impact. But what if, at the end of the day, he was just, I don't know, a messed up person, someone who, for whatever reason, just went down this horrible path? Does that change how you see him, how you see the case?
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like trying to see past the monster, past the myth, and see the human. It reminds you that, even the worst of us, we all started out innocent.
And that even when faced with evil, we can't forget, we can't lose our own humanity. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the mind of the Zodiac. Hope you found it, I don't know, informative?
Right.
Maybe a little creepy, but definitely something to think about. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, even with all the mysteries out there, the search for truth, it's always worth it.